But what I have here in my hot little hands is a creche. A creche, a word that comes to us from Latin by way of French, and which simply means manger. Because a creche is, of course, a manger scene. And being Christmas, I thought I would just lay it out here for us a little bit. So here we go. As in every creche, we have the star of the event, 10-pound, 9-ounce baby Jesus, right there in the center of things. Either side of Jesus, we have Mary, of course, and we have Joseph. Oh, that's not Joseph. This is Joseph right there, sorry. And then standing next to Joseph, we have a shepherd who was watching o'er his sheep at night. And of course, we have the angel who came to the shepherds bearing tidings of great joy for all people. And then, of course, we have the protagonist of this morning's story, the three wise men, right there. And of course, we have their ornery camel friend. Does anybody remember the name of the camel in our pageant? Lumpy. His name is Lumpy. We had a voting contest a couple years ago, and it is forever Lumpy. And voila, our scene is complete. Now, you can find similar such scenes on display at churches and at the homes of the Christian devout throughout the world. Does anyone have a creche on display at their own house? Yeah. I have one in my dining room from 10,000 Villages, I think. It's a common thing. Of course, you do. Of course, we do. A depiction of Jesus' birth at Christmas time. You can't get much more Christian than that. Or can you? Now, this is by no means a profound observation, but it is an observation nonetheless. But in this little manger scene of ours, technically speaking, there are no Christians. Not a single one. Jesus himself, at this point, is less concerned about the gospel message and more concerned about his eating and sleeping and getting his diaper changed. His parents, Mary and Joseph, they are observant Jews. They keep the Old Testament laws as best they are able, and they go to the temple on high holy days. The shepherds are what we would call nominally Jewish, because as we discussed earlier in this series, their work as shepherds left them ritually impure and unable to participate in any meaningful way in the religious life of the community. And then we have the wise men. And not only are the wise men not Christian, but they're not even Jewish either. Rather, they are Zoroastrian. And what's more, they're not just adherents of the Zoroastrian faith, they are in fact priests of the Zoroastrian faith. How do we know that? We know that because the word that we translate as wise men, magi, you've probably heard that word before, that word comes to us from Persian, and in Persian it is a title reserved for, you guessed it, Zoroastrian priests. But my guess is that most of you don't know a lot about Zoroastrianism, and that is because today their numbers are dwindling. There's only about 200,000 of them left in the world. However, for 1,000 years, it was the official religion of the Persian Empire, and it had a profound influence on the course of world history. In any case, because we just have this kind of crazy melange of religions going on in the story, I'm thinking it would be a good idea for us to take a quick pop quiz just to make sure that we're keeping our eye on the prize and remembering who is who in the story. So I'm going to read a set of statements, and when I'm done, I want you to just tell me who it is I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Easy enough. All right, here we go. He was immaculately conceived and born of a virgin. He was baptized in a river. In his youth, he astounded even learned adults with his wisdom. He was tempted in the wilderness by the devil. He began his ministry at the age of 30. He baptized his followers with water, fire, and holy wind. He cast out demons and restored sight to the blind. He taught about resurrection, judgment, and salvation. And he is heralded by his followers as the Word made flesh. I'm, of course, talking about... That's right, I'm obviously talking about Zoroaster, the founding prophet of the Zoroastrian faith. Zoroaster, who lived at least 600, if not 2,000 years before Jesus was born. And that list of beliefs I just read for you is a list of beliefs that Zoroastrians hold about the founder of their religion. Now, to be sure, there are more than a few parallels, aren't there, between what Zoroastrians say about their Zoroaster and what we Christians say about our Christ. And if you find those abounding similarities to be at all unsettling, if those parallels make you uneasy in any way, like say what now? I thought our religion was 100% unique. What is going on here? Is the pastor somehow suggesting that Christians are bootleg Zoroastrians? If you have any sort of feeling like that, good. Just sit with that feeling for just a minute. Sit with that discomfort and that dis-ease for just 1 minute. Because what that feeling is doing is telling us something real about the Christmas story. It's bringing to light a dynamic in the story that we almost never talk about. Because what we have going on in this story of the wise men's visit is priests from a foreign religion, a religion whose faith story bears a striking resemblance to our own. We have them paying a visit to the newborn baby Jesus. And while this very well could be a moment filled with inter-religious tension, and while it would be easy to imagine the wise men wanting to plot alongside Herod in order to snuff out this baby Jesus because the faith he represents is one in direct competition with their own, that is not what happens, is it? Far from being threatened by this little baby whose birth was announced in the stars, the wise men come to welcome and pay honor to him. They fall to their knees, the story says, and they offer him their reverence and their worship. And conversely, as our creche so beautifully shows, these foreign priests are welcomed in and their gifts are gladly received. Now, I don't know about you, but when I go to a religion's founding story, and that is what the Christmas story is for us, but when I go to a religion's founding story, whatever religion that may be, what I expect to find there is a lot of rigidity, right? A lot of narrowness, a lot of closed offness. I expect that story is going to be one that is accessible really only to people who practice that faith. But that is not what we find in our founding story. What we are met with here in this defining Christian moment, in this definitionally Christian moment, is not rigidity, is not narrowness, is not closed offness, but rather what we find is profound openness and welcome. So I think at least some of you are old enough to remember back about 15 years ago now to when we were approaching the 10-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. And at that time, you may recall that there was a heated national debate / controversy brewing through these states. You see, at the time, various American Muslim groups had come together proposing to build a community center and mosque near, not at, but near the site of Ground Zero. That story made the news every night for weeks and weeks and weeks, and every politician in America, up to and including even then President Obama, was weighing in with their thoughts on the appropriateness and the wisdom of such a venture. Not to be overlooked, 2 pastors in 2 different parts of the country also decided to weigh in on that controversy, each in their own way. The first pastor was a guy by the name of Terry Jones, and he was the pastor of a small church in Gainesville, Florida, by the name of Dove World Outreach Center. And if you can't already tell from a name like that, they were a rabidly conservative, fringe evangelical church akin to Westboro Baptist Church, alongside whom they would often protest. And what was Pastor Jones's unique contribution to this national conversation? If you remember, he is the one who made global headlines and inspired international protest when he announced plans for an International Burn a Quran Day. Do you remember this guy? However, in the wake of global condemnation and after numerous death threats, Pastor Jones canceled the event, not out of fear, he said, but because he had already managed to prove his point without it. What that point was exactly, no one is quite sure. But around about that same time, 722 miles northwest of Gainesville, Florida, in the city of Memphis, Tennessee, there was a second pastor, a pastor by the name of Stephen Stone. Reverend Stone was a pastor of one Heartsong United Methodist Church. And just as New Yorkers were learning that a Muslim community was looking to create a community center and mosque near Ground Zero, Pastor Stone received word that a Muslim community had purchased the land directly across from his church in order to build the same. And it needs to be said that this Muslim community, led by a Dr. Bashar Shalah, they didn't have their heads in the sand. They had been on the receiving end of all sorts of anti-Muslim sentiment since 9/11, and they were certainly aware that this little building project of theirs was happening at a time of acute interreligious tension in this country. And so that community's greatest hope was simply to be ignored. They just wanted to fly under the radar. They didn't want controversy. They just wanted to build their house of worship. But unfortunately, they did not get what they wanted. Because what Pastor Stephen Stone did was this. He went out and he had printed a giant 3-foot by 6-foot banner and had it placed in front of his church. And what did that sign say? It said, Heartsong Church welcomes the Memphis Islamic Center to the neighborhood. Dr. Shalah and his community were both shocked and surprised. The best they hoped for was antipathy, but what they found instead was profound openness and welcome. Now, which of these two pastors got it right? Which of these responses to people of other faith cleaves most closely to the witness and the example of the Christmas story? Without a question, it was Pastor Stone and his Heartsong United Methodist Church. But for the sake of honesty, I do need to let you know that not all the members of Heartsong were gung-ho about his outreach efforts. Some folk even considered leaving the church because they simply could not accept it. So they went to Pastor Stone and they asked him what he thought they should do. And you know what he told them? He told them to go and read the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. He said, go and read the Gospels. And to their eternal credit, those church members actually went and did that. They went back and they really read the stories of the Gospels, the stories of Jesus' birth, his life, his ministry, his death, and resurrection. And upon reading those stories, the conclusion that they ground to was, as one member put it, I figured out I was the problem. What was going on with the world today, all the hate and all the fear and all the violence, I was part of the problem. Which brings us to our point this morning, which is a recurring point here at Hillside Community Church, and I like to think that's not because of a lack of creativity, but because it's a point that bears repeating, and you're going to get some bang for your buck this morning because this is simultaneously a constitutional point and a biblical point. So here it is. We here in America, by virtue of our Constitution, we live in a relatively free country. And in this relatively free country of ours, you are free to hate whoever you want to hate, and for whatever reason you want to hate them. So you are free, for instance, to hate Zoroastrian people for being Zoroastrian. You can hate Muslims for being Muslim. You can hate Jews for being Jewish. You can hate immigrants for being immigrants and refugees for being refugees. You can hate gay people for being gay and trans people for being gay, or trans rather, and black people for being black, and homeless people for being homeless, and drug addicts for being addicted to drugs. And you are free to hate Republicans for being Republicans and Democrats for being Democrats. But what you are not free to do, with even a modicum of integrity or honesty or biblical literacy, what you are not free to do is to pretend that that hatred that you are spewing so freely, you are not free to pretend that that is the natural outpouring of your biblically informed Christian faith. Because when we look at the most Christian of Christian stories, the Christmas story, the founding story of our faith, we find in this story nothing but openness and welcome and love. And if you can't accept that, well, go read the Gospels, and then we'll talk. Amen.